Am I wrong in that too?
I broke hunting laws when I was a kid, fishing laws, technically on accident. I just learned this as an adult. I spilled all of our bait, or most of our bait, into the river, or the spot we were fishing. I've fished like 2 or 3 times in my life.
Ate well.
So I'm using this as a sermon illustration, like much later, and and I don't remember what I was talking about, but I called my dad. He's like, "Yeah, we caught so many fish that day because it's called chumming the waters, which you can tell how little of a fisherman I am."
All right, roll the intro.
Evening, officer. Is something wrong?
Don't worry, son. Routine traffic stop. We got reports of someone driving under the influence. You know anything about that?
Oh, wouldn't it be me? I'm only under one influence.
And what would that be?
The influence of Jesus.
It's time for Under the Influence.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children.
Welcome back to another episode of Under the Influence. I'm one of your hosts, Jude Crane, joined by your favorite co-hosts, Jerry Crane. And
Yeah, that's me.
Levi Thiessen. That's me.
Yeah.
And it's just the 3 of us for this episode. We've been thinking about having it. Well, just kidding.
It's not the 3 of us.
It's not the 3 of us. There's a 4 of us.
There's a 4.
Who's the 4?
Who's the 4? Go ahead.
Oh, my name. Is this real now?
Yeah, this is real. We're recording.
Okay.
49
This
seconds.
is-
we have a pretty.
This is Chad Harms.
Chad Harms.
There it is. Yep.
Brother Chad, welcome.
Harms.
Is that your
Yeah, I've heard.
Chad.
Like, you guys are using my name in the wrong way around here. I don't know why I agreed to come on.
Oh, you're referring to our references, certain men as Chads?
Yes.
Oh, well,
That's such a
Chad,
wild
you're
thing
not
to
a Chad.
Well,
Jude thinks you are.
Well, in certain ways, you have like, which isn't a bad thing.
but you could say, what a Brad. It has the same
Well,
effect,
Brad's,
right? Like-
Brad's got a different.
Didn't you hear us
meaning to it
talking
now.
on the podcast one time, and that's when you texted me, like, you guys use
Yes,
this?
that's real. Like, come on, what are we
Was
doing
it Jude's
here?
Dutch Brothers story?
No.
Like Thaddeus and
I think Jude just used it like nonchalantly. Like, I guess that's
Chad
a
is
Chad.
like-
and I'm like, wait, I
the
like
meme
you
of
guys.
Chad though has split, so now it means 2
Yeah.
polar opposite
Yeah,
things.
it does.
But it means both of them.
What are the 2?
One is like the Chad guy, like the Thad Brad that you're thinking.
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
And then the other one is
Or
like
the other one is like,
someone who just makes good decisions. And
he's like,
Yeah.
is
It's
a
like
Christian.
it's like a compliment.
yeah.
he's like this strong Christian man that believes in God and having a wife and a kid.
like traditional family values, just like a based.
Like somebody
Yes.
brings up
Yeah.
woke things and he's just like, no, I'm okay with that. And then turns around, worships God, and then goes and hugs his wife and kids.
I'm such a Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
There we
like,
go.
It's
Chad
just
move.
well, I meant the other Chad. See, you're a Chad. You're a Type A Chad. No, this would be Type B.
This would be Type
This
You're a
would
Type
be
B
Type B.
Chad.
Not like type A in the traditional sense. Like, you're saying like the first version of a Chad versus the second
Yeah,
version.
you're the
not like
second version of
uptight, because I'm
You're
definitely
a Chad
type A.
2.0.
Okay.
the base.
I didn't
like,
hear. I've not heard that.
No, yeah.
I didn't even really think about it, but they're definitely right because I've seen it.
That's why I had been like trying to tell you, like, it's not like, it's a compliment.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll take it.
It's
When we
used
use
just
it in-
as much as a compliment now, like as it is for an insult.
Yeah.
So we should actually
Yeah.
introduce him for real. Everybody listening, thank you for being here for another episode of Under the Influence. That's
right.
We're super glad you're listening. Chad is our pastor.
That's right.
right.
Yeah. Good
And
job.
You've heard. Well,
Glad
thank
you
you.
knew that.
Do I get a golden star for that one? No, we've talked about him before on quite a few episodes. We've also kind of like done a bit of a debrief here,
on
here
his
and there,
sermons.
on his sermons, and talked about things that we've learned.
how bad he does.
Right, we have done that.
Picked him apart.
Picked him apart. You know, us real scholarly theologians, we just pick him apart.
What a Chad first version.
What a Chad
First preach a bad sermon. Yeah.
Yeah. No, love him to death. Wonderful guy. Super glad. Love him until he's dead. Glad he's here. and we've actually been talking about having him on for a while, and I just haven't gotten around to asking him ahead of time. And we were at lunch today, and he's like, "So you guys recording the podcast today?" You know, he asked like that.
That was a good impression.
I did. No, that is actually just curious, but I want on there.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, you want to be on, don't you?" So,
Yep. I paid him $5, and here I am.
Yeah. Didn't pay for my lunch, just paid me $5. So.
Yep.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but actually,
Joking, yeah.
I'm really glad that you're here. It's a long since been overdue, and the only reason it hasn't happened sooner is we talked about it, and there was another guy that we were going to have on, and I had just promised that he would be on first, but it's just been kind of like back and forth until he's been able to do it. And so today I was like, yeah, wait, it's been forever since we've had a guest, and you're already sitting here with me. Let's do this. And so I'm glad that you're here.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. It took to episode 18 of season 2. Is that the story to get me on here?
Yeah.
Wow. You guys are like famous. I was so low on the agenda.
What is this?
When we run out of guests that are good, then we'll call you. So
We actually don't often have guests. We kind of made a promise that this season we'd have more guests, which I don't even know if that's true yet.
We had like them like back to back at times.
But last season we had like 4, I think, and a couple twice, or one of them twice, Byron. And this season we've had Carson, Bryce, and
your grandpa,
and my grandpa.
Yeah.
So that's 4. So I think we might be.
Didn't we have Byron on for one?
We had what the guy Matt. We had Matt on.
Yeah, that pathetic loser. Yeah.
Whoa.
We had him.
Yeah. Tall.
So if the
greasy
joke,
looking.
the inside joke, isn't aware to the listener, that just sounds like a horrible thing.
It does. I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
Like,
So, like-
they don't know he's sitting over there. It's way worse.
Yeah.
Matt's not here.
Oh,
We don't acknowledge.
Yeah, you don't acknowledge
You
can't
don't
acknowledge
acknowledge the existence of.
Matt.
that elephant in the room.
Well, and now I can't say what I was going to say earlier, but that's okay. Well, no, to be fair, Chad, you're right. Matt is sitting right there. The only reason we don't acknowledge is because when sometimes we insult him, he sits over there and he like threatens us with a weapon. So we can't acknowledge his existence, or else people would know that kind of thing's happening. But no, we'll be honest. Matt, a former guest of the show, he is sitting here. And he's going to keep us honest. So actually, he's probably going to just play solitaire on his phone.
People play solitaire still on
I
their
think my dad
phones.
does. I think my dad does. What does dad play on his phone now?
Pool. It's always
No,
pool,
it's
isn't
some card game. Maybe it's Mahjong.
Oh yeah, my grandpa likes that
Mahjong,
game.
really?
Yeah.
Is that a card game? I thought it was.
No,
more
it's a tile game.
Tile. Yep.
I was at the zoo recently, and I saw ivory. Okay, I have to talk about this.
Ivory?
Yeah,
Isn't that-
I was at the
can't you
zoo.
not do that?
Yes, I was at the zoo, and you go to the elephant section.
Yeah.
And elephants are cool. I think they're cool. It's fun to just watch them. You know what I learned about them though? They will just stand there, unlike other animals, and just like a statue, will not move. It's really impressive. Also, I've seen an elephant give birth. But
A crazy thing to
Wow.
throw in there.
Yeah.
At the end.
it's pretty nasty.
At the zoo?
At the San Diego Zoo,
Oh,
I was
great
there.
Zoo. Went there once.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of a Mexico mission trip, when you're absolutely so exhausted, it's hard to appreciate. Yeah, well, we were at the San Diego Zoo after the Mexico mission trip. I was standing by the elephant thing after other people had left. And remember the part that was like part of the elephant enclosure that you go around the back?
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't think we're supposed to be back here.
Yeah.
I don't think we were. Because there was an elephant in a cage by itself, just like moaning and wailing. And then all of a sudden just went and exploded. And then baby elephant
You don't have like a elephant doctor there, like
well, there
monitoring?
were like people watching, but like they don't. What do they do?
I don't know.
I mean, it's
Catch the baby?
no. It's like a wild animal. Like they let it. How, do you think there's doctors out there in the Sahara or wherever elephants are from?
No, they don't make lab coats that big.
Elephant doctors. Yeah.
Thanks, studio.
No, I was at the San Diego Zoo, and I just remember like watching this thing. I was like, "What's going on?" And there were some. What are they called? Zoo people.
How did I never hear
workers?
about this?
I've definitely told you about this. I mean, you were there. Did you not see it?
No.
How many people? Was it just you standing there? Like, were the rest of your
Did you
mission
dream
trip
this?
people there?
Because we were all
dream?
incredibly tired. Did you like
hallucinate this
pass
event?
out and?
Huh.
There's
And
no
just
way you
imagine
make
this.
this up. This is not one of those
I
things.
know
You're
I
like,
saw it.
saw that
Elephant
elephant.
doctors. This guy sounds crazy.
Because
I
that's
didn't say I know I saw it.
because I don't remember any of this.
Huh. Well, I know there was a long period of time where just David and I were walking around. Maybe I have to ask David about it.
That's cool. That's unique. I mean, jokes aside, like that's kind of a cool thing
Yeah.
to witness.
But I don't know. Maybe I am making this up without realizing it.
There's no way. That's
I know I've seen an
too
elephant.
big of a thing to make
Here's
up.
the thing. I was so exhausted then.
We were.
I know for a fact I've seen an elephant give birth. So I could be misremembering where it was. And
Yeah.
just thinking it was then.
Because we were so exhausted, we would like walk through, and then there's these
You know the, like
escalator
escalator-
things
the
in
flat
like
ones, though, like-
in
Yeah,
airports. Like they have that at the San Diego Zoo, and we would like be walking around, and we find one, and we just and then we just like sit down on it, and then
And
just
go to sleep.
watch the things go by and slowly go to sleep, and then
It was
have to
our
go.
junior year, and that mission trip specifically, we were like destroying the side of a mountain.
Yeah, we
and
were
carrying
literally-
the rock up the mountain, dumping it off the other side to make room for like a outside of a church.
Yeah.
And we were all so exhausted. And I remember that was like a triangle of these escalator things. And we just intentionally rode one of them to the other side and laid down on it.
Yeah.
Got to the other side, got up, got on the same one again, and rode it back. And we just did that for a while until Mr. Garvey saw us, and he was like, "What are you guys doing?" And then we just walked around because I felt so bad. It was so hard to appreciate the San Diego Zoo.
We went and watched the Ice Age 4D movie because we were so tired and just wanted to sit down.
Yeah, and
That's
that's,
we're
probably
the only
cooler
people that
too.
have
And
ever watched that
and
movie.
it's cooler inside the building, and it like they would spray mist on you.
Yep.
For like different parts of the movie.
kind of was annoying because it forced me to wake up.
Yeah, but
Garvey
it was
was
cool.
probably frustrated
so
because San Diego Zoo is expensive,
Yeah.
and you
That's
guys
why I
are
felt
just
bad.
sitting there like.
I felt so bad.
I think it's like like $80+
per
per
person?
person. I think. Yeah,
Well,
we were in San Diego this summer, and
You pay to go to that, or you raise then you raise money.
well, yeah, I mean, it didn't come out of your pocket, or else you've been running around seeing every animal.
No,
but
that's
it's
true.
an expensive. Like even our zoo's pretty expensive now if you don't go with the member. But I think San Diego Zoo's a lot, so that's probably why. As the teacher, he's like,
Well, I mean, we were aware
paid
of that.
so much
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
At least I know I was self-aware of that. Like I felt guilty, but it was also just like, dude, I'm so pooped.
I know,
Like,
and it's supposed to be fun, right? So if
Yeah.
you're not having fun,
it was hard.
just sit there.
But we did go around and look at stuff. I mean, I apparently may or may not have seen an elephant give birth. So
I think you did. I vote yes.
thanks, man.
How much did that cost? Way more
To watch? Well, I did pay extra to go into the room.
to witness the elephant.
They're like elephant births, $25. I was like, sure, man.
I'm here for
I'm here
this.
for that. Whoa! You know.
Have they no doctors? No elephant doctors?
Yeah. But no, I was at the zoo recently. You mentioned the member pricing thing. They have like a little train you can ride around.
Yeah.
And we were there for the zoo lights. If you haven't done that,
I have.
Okay.
It's awesome.
it is so cool.
It is. I agree.
I took that for granted for a while. It was magical. The train ride though, it's $6 per person, and it's a 6-minute ride. So it's literally a dollar. a
Yeah,
minute.
that's bad.
And there is a member pricing. Guess how much you save if you're a member and you buy it?
$1.
60 cents. It's such a joke.
That is pretty bad. But I think zoo members get like every
guess, is
time
that
they
10%
go.
off?
I guess that is 10%,
10%,
but still, like, why?
Yeah.
When it comes to
Yeah.
But I think it's like so much cheaper for members. They get like,
Really?
I think you get like 4 passes every time you want to go or something stupid.
Well-
So you're saving, if you go to the zoo like 2 times, you know, and I have kids that are young and they go with their grandparents usually because I'm not paying for the zoo. But like, but it's, I think it's like you get like 2 guest passes and your regular 2 passes or something, which would be, I think it's a lot now.
Yeah.
I think somebody told me they paid like $200 to take their family of 6 to the zoo lights.
Oh my
Or
god.
much
something
is
crazy
the
like
zoo
that. Now,
membership?
don't quote me on that, but it was a lot. I was like,
Well, I don't have
seriously?
it. Perry has a membership. and
See,
so
there you go.
she
You
took-
got to go with somebody that's a member.
And she said something like, I got to finally pay for something that we're going to do. But I don't know. She must have gotten passes then.
You,
I don't know, Perry,
you
you're
do,
listening
you
to
do.
this. I'll have to ask her about it. But it was just interesting because I assumed that she used her membership to like get a discount. And then I saw what the discount on the train thing was. And I was like, Oh my goodness, she must have paid a fortune for us to be here.
No, I think that she got you in for a really good deal. So sorry, Perry, to give that away, but I think you get like a lot of guest memberships. Right. So hopefully, anyway.
Yeah,
she was actually making money off you.
She's like, actually, if I use this, I get a fifth one, and no one's here, so I'm going to sell it to somebody.
There you go.
For $200.
Yeah. Only reason she invited you on that romantic date to get that free.
Well, we took
extra
Joel
membership.
and Jenna too.
Oh, okay. Oh, I saw those pictures. Yeah,
it was super fun.
It's like a romantic date for like a married couple with kids.
I didn't go to the Zoo Lights. I went when I was a little kid. I know. I just kept going. So weird.
I mean, yeah. All right.
So I went to the Zoo Lights just as a little kid, and I had to ask my dad. But then I went in a small group at
They
church.
had it that long ago?
I think so, because get out of here. It's kind of true though. I mean,
that's not what I meant. But like,
hey, the other day somebody said, we want some older guys around or some younger guys around, and I didn't know if they were. I've reached an age. I'm like, are they talking about I am the younger guy, or like we want some people younger than you around? And I sat there for probably 30 seconds to a minute, just wondering, like, what role am I in this situation? And I ended up being the young guy. So I was the young guy they were referring to. So, but the Zoo Lights, I went as a kid, apparently, my dad told me, because I asked him, and it never been again until, I was like probably 30 or something. And it's awesome.
Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I don't know why I guess, here in Kaiser, the lights are really good in the neighborhood. So maybe we just thought like you can drive around for free over on 14th Street or whatever. And so maybe we just never thought about going to other lights. And we have one of the best displays really in the whole state, actually.
You talking about the Kaiser one?
Yeah.
It is pretty cool.
I mean, you compare them to like Peacock Lane.
I don't know what that is.
It's like a street in Portland that everybody goes to. And it's like every house is amazing, but it's like one street, so it's like really quick, and you've driven all the way up. And so I put the Kaiser lights up there with any.
Well, because it's like a whole like suburb.
Yeah, it's like a neighborhood, like the whole neighborhood.
There's a lot of it that's not lit up.
Yeah.
But it's like at least every street you go down, there's at least 3 to 5 houses.
Yeah.
But then there are quite a few streets where the whole thing is lit up with lights.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful.
And it's so slow. I mean, which can be a negative.
Because it has to be.
I drive it backwards sometimes. What? Pro tip for all you Kaiser people: if you want to see the Kaiser lights quickly, just don't go the way the police signs say to go. It's a neighborhood. You can drive it backwards. So I've done it in like 5-10 minutes where I'm like, let's check out the lights, kids. Nobody seems to think of it either. Next year, I'm telling people it's going to be like traffic both ways. Yeah. Neighbors will be mad. I'll be the origin.
There's a lot of times where, because it's kind of blocked off, like I feel okay kind of just like veering off to the left side to look at a house. So if somebody was driving the other way, obviously I wouldn't do it if you were like driving opposite me. But I can imagine there's times if you're driving opposite where there's people just blocking the road.
No, I mean, I've gone really fast. You start like 40 miles an hour. I was really fast. I broke the record. It took me 35 seconds. I saw every light. No, you go down like by the church that used to be the State Farm building. Not far from where we sit now, like Cornerstone Christian.
Yeah.
You know where that is?
Yeah.
And you go down that road, and then you like enter on the opposite side of the traffic, and then you just go literally backwards.
Because it doesn't end there though. It ends off of Manzanita.
It ends where it starts, kind of, but you can just right, like you start on 14th and you go all the way around, and you
start by the Mormon church is where it's supposed to start, and then you end over by that gas station by like Wheatland.
Yeah, you can go out that way, or you can come back down 14th.
Okay,
that's right. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, go backwards. That's my pro Kaiser
Next year I'll do
tip.
that.
So you can do it in 5 to 10 minutes.
But I still think the zoo lights are, even though that's so good, they're worth going to see. So I'd never seen it before, and it's a different kind of thing because you're walking through tunnels. I don't know. Did you drive through it or walk through it?
Walk.
Okay.
I
so
like it a lot.
I didn't drive it.
I wouldn't want to drive it.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
it's not worth the
Christmas
money then. I mean, you're going so fast.
Huh?
And it has a Christmas thing, right?
Yeah. They light
it's still going on right now, I think. Oh, it might be done as of today.
Okay.
But it might still be going.
I don't know.
You have to look it up.
I don't like to be disparaging, but the PIR, Portland International Raceway,
I've heard that's not as good.
It's not worth the money.
We were going to go do that.
Yeah. Not good.
The zoo lights, though, like, if it's still going on, I mean, it's totally worth it. You can go, like, right when it starts getting dark and it's still a little light outside. We waited 30 minutes, so it was definitely dark. And then it takes about like 45 minutes ish, I think, if you're walking consistently without stopping to get through the whole thing, because it's a big circuit throughout the whole zoo. And there's just a bunch of it is just like a little light patterned crocodile, but then there's also these huge tunnels of lights that you can walk through. And
Jerry's saying it's worth it, but he didn't pay. His girlfriend paid. So if you could,
It's worth every dollar.
if you could get a girl to take you, it's totally worth
I should
it.
say I have no idea how much it costs. I just think it was really cool. So, and I know the kids loved it, and I loved it. So definitely worth. It was worth what I paid. So, yeah.
Why'd you tell us about the elephant? I don't remember.
Ivory.
There was a point.
The ivory. Yeah. So while I was there, we went to the zoo first, just did the whole zoo thing, and then came back an hour later when it was dark to see the zoo lights. And while I was there, we were watching the elephants, and I think they're just so cool because they do this thing where there's like 4 of them in the little area, and you're sitting in this like kind of amphitheater seating, just watching them. And it's not the most exciting thing because they're like the slowest animal ever, or one of them, and they're huge, and so it's fun to watch. What I love is they all seem to do this thing where when you're watching them, they start lumbering across, and then this one would like stand up on a log and then put like one front foot in front of the other, kind of lift it up slightly, like you see like elephant statues, the way they do that pose. I guess elephants actually just do that because it had like one foot kind of picked up in front of the other, and then its back feet on this log, and then it like put its head up, and then it sat still for like a minute and a half, just like completely still. It's not that crazy to like talk about, but I just was like, look over there, that one's not moving. I'm like, well, surely it's an animal, it's going to move after a little bit, and it just like stood still for so long. I was like, it's definitely dead, or
It's definitely dead.
or like
It's a
something.
weird death pose.
Yeah, but then its ears just kind of moved around, and then it still didn't move, and then finally, it's just weird. It's just, I like how like they
It was
just
an
stand.
ex-circus elephant.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was thinking.
It was trained for the photo ops.
But the whole ivory thing was just that I find it so ironic that we're looking at these elephants, and so of course, because just like with polar bears, they have to kind of bring in some political motivation because you're there to see them. I shouldn't say political, something, and you go behind it. And there's just this little thing about elephants. And so, of course, it's talking about ivory and how horrible, like, the ivory poacher or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, the whole thing was apparently, like, over 30,000 elephants, or it was some ridiculous number, it might have been over 50,000, are still killed every year
Oh, man.
for ivory.
Yeah.
Didn't know it was that big of a thing still, though, right? Which makes me wonder how big it was before. But then it's showing off how I'm pretty sure under the Clinton administration, they made this huge push for ending ivory. Actually, okay, cool. That's a good, not ending, well, like ending the trade of it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And so I'm watching this video. It's an informational video about how many were being killed, how many are still being killed, blah, 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 blah. And then it's showing Hillary and Bill Clinton up there like, we are going to stop the illegal ivory trade. And the way we're doing it, the way we're sending this message is they collected tons, like literal tons of old ivory statues and jewelry, and they put it out in like Times Square through a wood chipper. And to me, that's the most disrespectful and ironic way to send the message of like, we're stopping this, is being like, well, those ones now died for nothing. To be like, because we can appreciate, I think ivory is beautiful, and like there's these cool things you can make out of it. And the zoo even was displaying some beautiful ivory mahjong tiles and like these statues of elephants. And it was talking about how like, we understand why people do this because ivory is beautiful. And then it's like, so to send a message to the rest of the world that we're not okay with it, we're taking all these things that they used it for and we're destroying them. And I just think it's ridiculous. I mean, maybe that is effective, but I think it's like, should we end this? Sure, we should stop. I mean, brutally killing animals and then like leaving their carcasses around and just taking these things, whatever. If it is actually posing a problem to their existence, I mean, we already know how callous I can be apparently to hunting animals, as described on the show before with the light thing.
Yeah.
Didn't we talk about that? Yeah. It doesn't matter.
He wants to cheat and hunt.
I'm all for people doing that thing where they flash floodlights on elk or whatever and then shoot them. Like, who cares if you make it easier?
No comment.
We're killing them anyway.
You're the sports guy. You should be on our side.
If you're still
It's about the sport.
oh, it doesn't matter. My
You guys don't know I don't like killing things, dude. I
Yeah,
know
but you're a
like I'm on the
sportsman.
hot seat all of a
Recognized
sudden.
I didn't know that about you.
I just don't. I don't even kill spiders in my
Oh,
house.
you guys are the same.
Yeah, we
know
are
that.
similar.
I
in
don't
that
think there's anything
regard,
wrong with
so-
that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with hunting. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That's why I'm saying if hunting's okay, and we're already limiting hunting by the amount at which we're allowing them to hunt, who cares how easy it is? That was my thing about spotlighting. But I was so wrong, apparently, so I do not want to talk about it again. My thing with elephants, though, is obviously, like, I think it's wrong if they're going extinct because people are doing it. So, yeah, it should be stopped. And it's just interesting to me that the way that it's just such an ironic message to me for them to send, to be like, this is cruel, we're ending it. And so the ones that have already died as a result of it, we're turning the beauty of what they at least turned into dust. I thought that was funny. Am I wrong in that too?
I broke hunting laws when I was a kid, fishing laws, technically on accident. I just learned this as an adult. I spilled all of our bait, or most of our bait, into the river, or the spot we were fishing. I've fished like 2 or 3 times in my life.
ate well.
So I'm using this as a sermon illustration, like much later, and and I don't remember what I was talking about, but I called my dad. He's like, yeah, we caught so many fish that day because it's called chumming the waters, which you can tell how little of a fisherman I am. But he's like, yeah, that's illegal. And that's probably why we caught so many fish that day, because you chummed the waters. So I know.
Was the illustration that you were saying it was a good thing? Like you had thought, why don't more people do this?
No, I don't think so. So I think that originally that the illustration was, maybe I was teaching about like dad as a father, like, or God as a father. So I was just calling my dad to like catch this fishing story, that had something to do with that. But then I've used it later for like how we could do better as Christians if we're, using the fishermen of men analogy to chum the water before we just try to get a hook on somebody. So, yeah.
What does that look like?
I guess this is going to take a serious turn, but I think chumming the waters looks like, so this book, one of my favorite books, called Finding Common Ground. And it's a book about how too often we try to harvest and we don't want to sow enough. And so he talks about a lot in that book. And this guy was a campus crusade guy. So like an organization that's really evangelistic.
Christ?
Yeah. I think they go by a different name now.
Really?
I don't remember, because crusade has a negative term.
What? Campus,
Yeah.
crusade, Christ.
That's 3 C's.
It sounds...
They have another name. I just said it the other day. Anyway, and so
Crusades.
he's really, really evangelistic. Not that. And
They were evangelistic, kind of.
yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Sorry, go ahead.
And
Sending a lot of people.
but the whole book is about how really we sometimes need to play the role of sower and not harvester, and maybe and now I don't know if I agree with this, but we all quote Jesus saying that the fields are ripe for the harvest, and his premise in the book is that maybe there are times in history where the fields aren't ripe for the harvest, and we need to chum the waters or sow the seed in order that somebody else can come along and harvest. So he talks about, and this is the one that stuck with me the most. Churches will give like scholarships to people who want to be pastors, like to go to school. And he said like maybe churches should be giving scholarships to people who like want to go to film school, so that we can begin to plant seeds. And talks a lot about how he kind of changed my opinion on Christians who like in Hollywood, who are just not so overt in their Christianity. And he talks about how they won't get work anymore. And then the ability to make, a difference, to chum the water. So one example of, I guess, chumming the waters, to use this phrase, would be like, he talks about how people should be making movies that show that there is right and wrong.
Yeah.
So that when a Christian comes along and says, hey, there's this thing called sin, there's this backdrop to it. And I think it's one of the reasons that Christians are drawn to superhero movies, is because there's some of that. But there's been this movement in my lifetime away from right and wrong in movies. Yeah. And even now, you know, like we do I'm not a superhero movie guy, but like the Joker, and they tell his backstory, and there's this effort to make, you know, like, oh, I know he did all the evil, but, you know, like they've made us sympathize with the bad guy, which I'm not saying is inherently bad, but it seems like this movement to make you question whether or not there's any black and white in movies.
I think it's 100% intentional too.
Right. And so his point is, like, we need directors that are showing those things. Yeah. And funny enough, on my testimony podcast, a connection reached out to a guy who made the movie. He's a director. He made the movie about Columbine and the girl who doesn't deny Jesus, and some other things. And he, maybe I shouldn't out him, but he didn't want to come on my show, because a strong Christian, wants to keep making movies that aren't Christian movies.
Right.
And so, and he said it just might not happen if he's like too overt. So it made me more like sympathetic to that idea. Mm-hmm. So there's chumming the waters for you. I think we should sow sometimes, instead of just pushing, tell people about Jesus. Like, maybe we could have a conversation, and that's good, but maybe we could have a conversation that helps the next person tell somebody about Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, I hear more and more. I don't know where I was listening. I might have been listening to another podcast or something, but somebody was talking about how Christian movies, the idea of Christian movies have always been that they're just bad. It's because they're not making, it's the Tim Hawkins podcast. Yes, Tim Hawkins. They talk about how, like, for so long, like 20 years, it's like if a movie comes out that's a Christian movie, the reason they do so bad is because they are bad. Because they're bad movies, like they're bad stories. The stories are almost never good, because it is like, if you look at other movies, like secular movies, a lot of the ones that also feel bad are these ones where you come out of it feeling like, this wasn't a story. This was a message disguised as film. Which there's something to be said about spreading the message of the gospel. But when the idea is that people are like, well, we're trying to make a good movie too. Sometimes those things aren't, what's the word? Congruous? Is that the word? Those things don't go together.
Congruent.
Congruent. Thank you.
Congress.
I don't know how Congress got into this, but
you can't do that in Congress. No, but like you do have some movies that have a strong message, and they are great. Like you've got, who are those brothers? They make like Courageous.
Wayans. Oh yeah.
I think their movies are wonderful, and there's an overwhelming
it's a step
message
in the right direction, for sure.
But it's because they are putting a huge emphasis on time to make a good story.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes it's like you have churches that are like, well, we're going to try and like be hip or whatever. We're going to make a movie for people to watch. And then this idea of at least trying for good storytelling and writing just kind of goes out the window, because they're like, well, we got our 5-minute segment in here where the guy gives the gospel message, and then the rest of it's just like, eh.
We were just talking about at lunch, Charles Dickens, and and sometimes people look for meaning when there's not really meaning there. But Charles Dickens, he writes these stories that have plain meanings and messages, right? But he doesn't. He's telling a great story that message gets revealed through, versus just saying, I want to get this message across, so I'll kind of put a story around it, you know, like
needless. Yeah. What's the word? Filler? Needless exposition.
Like, instead of letting the story stand as a valuable lesson.
Which speaks to like letting your actions speak louder than your words sometimes, right? And living a specific way, which can be seen in storytelling if the characters are seen, like you're saying, this clear idea of good and evil, and like doing these good things, and that's what the story is about. That's totally different than culturally. I'm kind of all over the place, but I agree with what you said earlier, and I said it was intentional. I actually really do believe it's intentional, that culturally the world wants this idea of sympathizing with the villain to be so much more of a readily available thing, a constant thing. And there are some stories where sympathizing with the villain is fun, because the villain can be this like was good and just went too far, you know, and then you can go like, oh, I can see, and where you can sympathize with the villain where you're like, oh, I can see how like a normal guy who's a generally good guy or whatever, trying to do a good thing, becomes this villain because he goes too far. And then it was kind of like Hollywood was like, oh, people like these stories. Let's make all of them that.
Yeah.
And Jude and I have talked a lot about that. I think the three of us talked a lot about that because we play a lot of D&D, or at least we did. We play D&D every now and then now. And I found myself like making bad guys in the story always needing to have this like redeeming thing where you guys would be like, wait, should we actually try and stop them? And then I realized like, oh, this is actually kind of annoying because it's what we're seeing in media all over the place. But then it does kind of speak to a greater issue, which is I wonder how much of that is intentionally malicious. Like, I don't know. I like to wonder that in general when we pick up on something that we can isolate as like something that may not actually be good for society. And then I go, well, I wonder how many people are like sitting there going, let's do this bad thing. But I don't really know if there's any validity to that.
Well, the first time I heard the word postmodern was in a college class. I'm old enough to remember when postmodern wasn't just what we lived in. And I remember the thing they said is that right and wrong will be really grayed. Like there will be no real right and wrong. And I don't know if it's intentional or a product of culture, but that's totally happened in movies. Like it used to be, you know, like good guy versus bad guy, right? Like that's how we did stories. And now for sure, and it's not even just the sympathizing with the characters, it's sympathizing with the actions that maybe concerns me more.
No, that's true.
Where you're like, oh, I see why murdering those people was maybe an okay decision. And it's like, wait, no, it's not. There is good and evil. That's an important concept that I don't watch a lot of superhero movies, like I said, but that's definitely become more of a thing for sure.
It's pretty sad.
It is.
And then we do have examples now too of some movies that you'll have groups of people, especially Christian groups, who go like, this movie, it's not at all a Christian movie, but they'll just be like, this one's a good one. If you're a Christian, go watch this. Like I remember people saying that about Quiet Place when it came out. And it was just because, and I was like, oh, I hadn't seen it yet. And I was like, is there a Christian message in it? I don't know if I don't think John Krasinski is a Christian. I mean, I guess he's kind of based, but like in a lot of his movies, but
Chad type B.
Yeah. But like, and both of his movies got that acclaim. Two of his, 13 Hours and Quiet Place. And the idea was like, and I saw online in Christian circles, like, go watch this movie if you're a Christian. It's a good one for your family to watch and everything like that, because it kind of promotes Christian values. So then I went and watched it and I was like, what? Like there wasn't a scene that made me think like, oh, this is secretly him being a Christian saying Christian values. But then I realized really what it is just that it's kind of what you're talking about. I think it's an example of a movie where what is made important in that is self-sacrifice, living for other people, like like actionable love, things like that. And then against a just not ambiguous at all, but very clear evil force. Yeah. Like a negative force that is clearly evil and is the bad thing. And there's no like, there's a mystery around it for a little while that's fun for the story about finding out that they can't, or that they can't see, they can just hear or whatever, right? But then, which isn't really a mystery. It's made pretty clear at the beginning. But like there's a mystery about like what they'll look like, and they do a good job of just, that's just cinema, I guess. But it's not ambiguous at all. Like this is just the bad guy. And there's never a twist in like an M. Night Shyamalan twist where you find out that the people are the bad guys or anything crazy. It's just that these are the bad guys and this family is trying to survive. And you get to see these beautiful interactions of like family values and a father being a good father and things like that. But I remember when I first came out, I was just like, why are Christians saying this? It's not a Christian movie, but who knows? Maybe he has some Christian background and maybe he's trying to be one of those. When you were saying being a sower, it kind of makes me think too, like maybe this guy's perspective is that we need more Christian sleeper agents in Hollywood. But in a way, it's like, what if we did slowly over time? Would that be an inappropriate approach to have Christians who are just being honorable in the roles that they're taking in the movies they're making? And they just slowly, more and more of them aren't being so outspoken that it makes them not allowed to do these things, to be pushed out of it, until like there is at least a significant minority of Hollywood that are these people, or even a majority, to where then it does allow that harvest, like you're saying. I think that's super cool. And it's funny because the idea of that almost sounds wrong. Because when you talk about it, then it's like, well, aren't we supposed to be bold and not bashful and like not hiding who we are? So is there a fine line there, or does that not consist of hiding who you are as a Christian?
So I think it's a fine line, but I think one of the weird parts of our culture today that I don't think any of us really know, I'll say I don't know how to navigate this. like does not hiding who we are mean posting everything that we are, you know? And that's, and so for them, like, I think there's a difference, but it's a more nuanced difference than it's ever been, because of social media and just media in general. But like, I think, you know, for me in my little world, right? Like I try to use Instagram to make a difference, but that doesn't mean just like posting my sermon all the time or getting on there and just being like, hey, living for Jesus today, because I don't think that would be as effective. And so it's like, how can I share a picture of my kids and connect with people in a better way, like use social media for its original intent, right? And then B, actually present something of value without just being like, you know, be a Christian. And so I think that hopefully we have some, you know, producers and directors and actors that are at least considering that, because we don't have to share everything about ourselves, but for sure they would have to be willing to be like, I'm a Christian, you know, but does that mean in your Oscar speech that you have to be like, I think Jesus? I don't know that it does. I don't know that, you know, to not get up there and present the gospel is necessarily hiding anything. But I would hope that the people, you know, these people that have more influence than us would be considering how we do that. I think more Christians just on you know, our level need to consider that about social media. I think God's given us a platform, each of us, you know, whether it's 50 people or 500 people or 10,000 people. And we should be thinking, is there a way I can post that actually moves the needle in people's spiritual lives? Because, you know, for me, most of the people that follow me are not Christians, or at least not active in their faith. And so like, how do I move the needle? And I don't think I've hit anything. I think everybody on, you know, that knows me at all, just if it's on social media, knows I'm a Christian. And, you know, I did it pretty effectively a couple years ago. I had a girl reach out and said that my posts had made a difference in her life. And I don't think this was a Christian at all. So I would hope they would think the same ways, right? Like whether it's us with, you know, 5 people that are following us on TikTok, or, you know, an actor that has 5 million followers, hopefully we can all consider like, how do I use my platform, small or big, to lead people to Jesus, whether that's short term or long term, whether I present the gospel or somebody else does it, but how can I actually make a difference? How can I combat this idea that there's no good and evil in the world? You know, like what can I actually say? Or, you know, one thing I try to do is like gently just, you know, talk about some of the difficulties or the things that, you know, I don't like, without being a whiner on social media, because nobody likes that, right? Like everybody's going to tune that out if I'm like, I'm sick today. Like nobody wants to know that. But, you know, like, hey, you know, like, it's one post I remember is just like, my kids are getting old so fast, and there's sadness in that. But it's also really cool to know that God's using me to shape them, you know, like things like that hopefully make a difference. Yeah. That's my soapbox.
Well, I love it. We've actually talked about, I mean, it kind of lines up with stuff we've talked about before. Actually, that episode that our grandpa was on, where we talked about how everybody, whether they realize it or not, is, excuse me, sorry. He used the word influencer, right? Which is a word I like to stay away from because of the negative connotation that comes with it within our generation, at least to me, there's a negative connotation to it. But to him, there wasn't necessarily one. He was just adding the R at the end of the word influence. I think at least. Well, no, he was quoting our generational. Yeah, he was like, what do you call it? A YouTube influencer,
right,
you know?
yeah.
And but we end up coming to the conclusion that like without realizing it, or whether you realize it or not, everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
You are an influence on somebody.
On somebody, whether, like you said, 5 people, and it's even whether or not you're on something like social media. It's just that like and it's not this such a profound thing to say necessarily, because it does feel very simple, but I don't think many people think about it. Or I should say, I think there are more people than I originally realized that aren't thinking about it, which is that they don't even think about who they're affecting, because it's so easy to be just entirely inwardly focused. Like, my life is only affecting me. My decisions are only affecting me, when in actuality, a lot of the things you do are affecting people around you, and a lot of people you don't even know. And then if you're choosing to do something that that has some sort of outreach or some sort of megaphone on it, like we're doing this, and we're not at least considering that, and we're not being intentional about that, if we're just having fun and not considering the fact that people actually, whether they're not listening now, in the future they might be, you know, and this is the thing he was trying to get across to us, is that like, you're squandering that. You're wasting your time, or you're wasting the time God has given you and the opportunities God has given you. And so, yeah, with people that are online, or man, it would be so great to see people in Hollywood just like be intentional.
The media eats it up when people like act good and are good around other people, and like they paparazzi around them and they don't find any dirt, like Keanu Reeves, for example. Like, the media was eating it up because everything.
He's just this good boy.
He was just this good person.
Yeah.
And then, like,
but if he came out and said, "I'm a good person," the only good in me is God, you know?
Yeah.
Like, none of the good in me is me, which I don't actually know if Keanu Reeves is saved. I don't.
Yeah, I don't.
think
I
have no idea if he's
spiritual
saved
life
or not.
Sorry, I cut you
But
off.
what if he comes out at the end of his life, though, you know?
Yeah.
Or what if, like, I think that there's something to a guy like him, you know, and playing the long game there, for sure. I want a shirt kind of that says, "You are an influencer." I kind of like that. People would be like, what does that mean?
Reclaim the
influencer. remove the
Yeah.
negative
Well, people would be like,
connotation.
"What do you mean?" You know, like, I'm not an influencer.
It is a good,
it's a
like,
good conversation.
Conversation.
That is
starter.
really true.
for sure.
Because some people would find it cringy and be like, "Oh, what do you mean I am?"
Yeah.
And you could be like, "No, let
Just
me."
need some merch now.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We're gonna steal that. That's
It's
our
all right.
intellectual
It
property.
was your grandpa's. I just,
That's true.
you
I mean,
know.
because we've been trying to think of something for Under the Influence for a while, and the best thing we came up with was ask me about my UTI.
That's incredible. I think
t-shirt.
you guys should have shirts that say "You are an influencer."
Yeah, we
Yeah.
should.
And then on the back, ask me.
Ask me about my UTI.
Wait, what's on
We
the
got to
back?
throw that in the. No, what you were just saying. I was going to say something earlier when you were talking about going up and giving an Oscar speech. What's really interesting, right, is the media. They will pick up on these good boys, these ones that are like, they're like, oh, they're just nice guys, but they're not saying they're Christians. And who's to say they are or not? We don't know. But then you have the media pick up on people like Chris Pratt, who I definitely can't say he's living his life right all the time, you know, but he proclaims to be saved. And there are times in which he is, at least it seems, trying to give the glory to God. And he did this like MTV thing where he went up and accepted an award.
speech, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good speech.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it, though, is the world system obviously is in opposition to the church, right?
Yeah.
And this whole thing is like a little grouping of the world system. All these people, these Hollywood stars who in no way are seeking to glorify God. And you had this one guy up there who is giving a speech and thanking, you know, a bunch of people for this award. But then he spends so long talking about, like, he's telling you, you know, believe, pray, like all this stuff. And it'd be great if you could look at it and be like, well, this guy definitely represents this most of the time. And so I really love what he's saying. But there is something to be said about just what he's saying. So
Yeah, so there was some theological, like one theological
Yeah.
issue with that speech.
There was a
but I
few
will
things.
say, to me, what that felt like was an effort of a guy to not be so overt that everybody just stopped listening, right? Like, if he got up there and gave a sermon, but he was trying, I mean, if I can just give him I don't know him, like you said, there's some things about his life, but like if I could give him as much credit as I could, if I could say it in the best way, there's a guy trying to find a way to sow some seeds without just getting the microphone shut off.
Yes.
I mean,
he's trying to find the line,
figuratively,
right? Like
he did, and so he, believe, like that's pretty vanilla.
I think the one thing he said, which just more than believe, was like pray
and pray. I remember.
I don't think he called to believe first.
Yeah.
He just said like pray. It's good for your soul. It's good. And so like there were some things he said about it where it's
and
like,
there's a being who like wants to
That's
connect to you. And
Something
so
I really respected about it was
that
he
he
almost
didn't-
approached it like the cosmological argument, which
he
says
did.
there's a God, not necessarily the Christian God. And so it seems like he made a conscious effort to say things that like they're not going to shut the microphone off for, because there's a lot of people that we don't want to offend that believe there is a God.
Yeah.
Right? He's saying pray, believe, but he wasn't saying like Judeo-Christian values. Yeah.
Right,
He wasn't
right.
endorsing Judeo-Christian values.
which
But he is.
But he proclaims to be Christian, but in
Right.
this specific instance, he chose to I feel like the words were somewhat, there was like conscious thought in them.
Right. And the effort, right?
Yeah,
like
the
that's
effort is
cool that if we're right, if he wasn't just being vanilla because he was scared or because, he didn't want to offend, but if he really sat there and thought, how do I write this in such a way?
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
yeah. I mean, based on the evidence, I'd like to believe that that's what he did.
More than just like the media like loving like the kind of things until it like comes out that they're Christian and then they're like yikes. But like for another example, Brendan Fraser.
Fraser.
It is Fraser. Yeah.
Is it really?
Is it
So
Fraser?
it is
He's in my generation. I didn't know
like
that.
Razor, it is Fraser, and the poor guy. Only now in the Renaissance has he been really adamant about it. But he says
I feel so horrible.
there are some interviews where he goes like, nobody says it right, and he's like, and it doesn't make me mad. It just makes me sad. And so Adam Sandler is talking to him, and he's like, is it Fraser or Fraser? And he's like, Fraser, like a razor. And he's like, I'm just going to say Fraser. Just let me say Fraser. And he's like, ah. And he's sad about it. And then Adam Sandler's like, all right, Mr. Fraser. And he's like, oh. And he goes, is it bad? Should I just say it that way? And he's like, it felt so good to hear it. And then it's sad to hear him say that. Because he's like, everybody says it wrong.
Yeah.
Wait, Levi has a point, but did you say Brenda song?
Renaissance.
The Renaissance.
we are living in.
Is he making a comeback?
Brendan
He's
Fraser,
making a comeback,
yeah.
he had like all the mummy moves and things.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like a big star, and
Yeah.
then he kind of just like shut down.
Yeah.
Well, he came out about like assault. He said that an executive producer, he was like, it's not just a woman thing. Like men are being assaulted too, and something had happened to him, and then he got like canceled,
Blacklisted.
literally blacklisted from Hollywood because he said that, because he like called out like a Harvey Weinstein type or something about something that happened to him.
That was before
was
Me Too
before all
stuff,
that.
right? Yeah.
But it's just because the idea is it's because he's a man, but
And he had divorced with his wife.
Yeah.
And he just like a few years ago is when it all like came back up again. He finally paid the last alimony check and never has to pay anymore. And he had the biggest smile on his face.
Yeah.
He was like a man freed because he hadn't been doing any movies. So it was all coming out of his bank from like what he had. So he had to save it to give to alimony.
Yeah.
Or else like getting in
the
much
Renaissance
trouble.
is just because he's
But-
like acting again.
And
Some people are calling it the
now he's
Renaissance.
acting and
people like him again.
but the media doesn't really understand it. Like whenever they do stories on it, they don't like they don't go into like why people actually like him and things. They're just like, oh, everyone's excited for his new movie, his new controversial movie, The Whale.
The media isn't really in on the joke. They just don't
Okay.
get
Which is
like,
that they're kind of the butt of it, right?
Yeah, they're the butt of it. And but it just like shows if we can get people to be in the media, like not even like going out shouting from the rooftops in Hollywood, but like just being an example of not doing these kind of roles and being a good person, like while the cameras are on and off of them, like when it's paparazzi cameras or in front of like actual cameras.
Actual cameras.
That like
You mean Christians being in the world but not of the world?
Yeah.
Whoa.
But when that happens, like, people notice even when the media tries to steer away from it. People like do congregate to that because they see like the value of that person, that they're not like everyone else that just goes into Hollywood, becomes an alcoholic or addicted to drugs, and then has their little climb and fall and whatever.
What I was saying about the Chris Pratt thing earlier, though, was just that one thing I find kind of ironic and interesting about that whole situation, right? I think you brought up something different than what I was saying, but I think is good, which is that like we can find some value in what he did. And if this was intentional, this is really good. But
Except for the theology.
Right.
Of
Yes.
it, which wasn't so
which
good.
was not,
but yeah.
Which is just because, I mean, there's also like, if you go into specifics of the church he's a part of too, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But while he's up there doing that, you have all these people that the camera's panning over and showing the audience. And it's all of these other actors who are like, you really can't give them much credit for the way they're living their lives, right? Just like clear examples of worldly behavior and carnal behavior. And they're going like, yes, oh, he's talking about Jesus, you know? And it's so funny because like they know the thing is to be like, thumbs up, this is good.
Yeah.
Oh no, I
whatever's
approve.
going on.
But then if it was just them, they're never going to promote it, or they're probably going to like counteract it as much as they can.
Yeah.
Or at least with the way they live their life. And I just think it's so funny when there are people, or you have athletes, or just people that are given the mic for a second. Like there have been athletes like fighters that go and there was some fighter that won recently. I think it was MMA or UFC or something. I don't watch any of it, but I just saw a clip, and he just says outright, he's like, the only reason I won is because God is in my corner, right? And he's like, the only person I want to thank is Jesus Christ who has saved me. It was just like this really nice, succinct thing. And it wasn't really being a sleeper agent as much as he's like being pretty direct, but I loved seeing it. And then you've got just a whole bunch of people that are like on the sidelines who are casting it or whatever. They're just like, wow, you love to see it. And it's just funny to me when they say that and you're like, dude, there's no way they mean that. Because
then you wonder if our whole premise that I've brought up here is not true at all then, right? Like, is it making any difference? Because if people are like, hey, yeah, and it's like, well, are you even hearing, that he's saying
what I'm
something?
wondering is I wonder if that speaks to the validity of what you're saying. I wonder if it speaks to the idea that because there's so many people who are not Christians that are just kind of living appropriately in these spaces, right? And then you have the occasional few who really don't have much of a foundation that just get brave enough to try and say something.
Yeah.
That you have all these people who don't actually care, and they're just like, oh, yeah, this is where we clap. Because you don't have enough of the people that are there with the foundation to be like, whoa, this is good, but let's maybe talk about the theology of it. Because that would serve no purpose to talk about the theology of it with a bunch of people who aren't saved, who aren't believers, who couldn't care less. So if we did have more of these people who are just like living a life of godliness, at least they're doing their best to, and it is important to them to be intentional, and that's just what they're doing, and they're involved in these areas, and they're making good movies and with a good strong message, and they're being allowed to do it until they've invaded that space, right? Which is a term that we use with Christian influence a lot, right? Is we're trying to invade the space, which is, I like the mentality of it. I don't know. I'm kind of like postulating here. Yeah. But like, what if, it's a bit of a what ifism, but what if that was the case? How would it look, and would it look different? I definitely think it'd look different, but would it look like we have people clapping, but you could look at all the people clapping in the audience and be like, well, they're clapping because they agree and they get it. And then now, because it's been long enough where you have all these people that have been just kind of living it, not super outspoken, sowing the seeds, doing this, changing the culture around this area. And then you did get that brave guy who goes up there and does thank God and gives a bit of a sermon. And now all these people are encouraged and they're clapping. And then it would sort of start this movement, but it would have a foundation rather than this whole group of people who literally could not care less. If anything, they hate it. And you get one guy with not much of a foundation who goes up there, says some things that are wrong, but it's like, oh, we kind of have to praise him for trying. but then it goes nowhere. Except for you just have some people that don't care, but they see it as encouragement or like self-help in a way, and they're like, yeah, and then it dies.
I used to tell people on Sundays, if they don't experience the love of God in the parking lot, they won't believe me when I preach about it. And I think there's what you're saying is kind of like if you haven't seen Christians really living for Jesus, Christians in quotes living for Jesus, then it's hard to believe anybody that gets up there and tells you they'll make a difference in your life. So yeah, I do think Christians, maybe because of, if you just look historically in our country, Christians in America have not really been willing to play the long game. Yeah. And missionaries, they go and they talk to individuals, but you go into a non-Christian culture, for lack of a better phrase, and you realize, like just standing up and saying Jesus loves you isn't going to get the job done, right? And so you're really trying to sow seeds, and you hope that some of those are harvestable at the end. And I think that we probably need to think more like that in our current American culture. Yeah. And part of that is, if any actor or producer or anybody, that's famous is asked, do you love Jesus? They need to say yes. And if they're asked the reason that they're different, obviously they would be untruthful to say anything but Jesus. But maybe we just need to find ways, we do it musically, same thing. You got Christian music, non-Christian music. And, there were some bands that did it. Creed, Show My Age, and Vertical Horizon, I think, back in the day, where they were Christians that weren't doing Christian music. And maybe that had as much of an influence on non-believers as Christian music does, or more. I don't know.
It doesn't help too that there are large groups of the church that vilify those people because they're saying you're using your platform and not using it. They're like, you should be more outspoken. And I think they're doing a significant amount of harm as well, but it's a hard thing to call them out for because it's hard to tell them that they're wrong for saying you should be preaching the gospel. It's like, well, 100% we should be, but, this guy's making music that people are enjoying. And so I have had quite a few friends who tell me, and I know that they're they have told me like they're not Christians, right? But they loved Switchfoot growing up. That's another one that I think Switchfoot is actually a little bit more on the side. They make a lot of music that's definitely Christian music, but there's so much of it as well that it's just not. It's just like good rock music. And they're like, oh yeah, Switchfoot, and there's another one.
Lifehouse was that way.
There's another one like Switchfoot though. Is it Reliant K? Aren't they a Christian band?
They started really overtly Christian, and I think kind of moved out of that, which I don't know if that's different, but
that's different. Yeah.
One thing I basically
maybe it's
Cutlass.
Is that
comes out of Oregon? Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
I went to this concert a while ago with 94.7, their birthday bash, and it was my first concert I've ever been to. Basically went there alone. I was with a friend of the family, but then I lost him in the crowd.
Yeah, he ditched you.
But
say his name, vilify him here. No, just kidding.
No, but I had a bunch of conversations with random people, like in between sets. And a lot of them were saying, my first concert that I went to was Creed. Like, so many of them were saying that. They were all like, oh, you too? Yeah.
Crazy. And like, people don't admit to liking Creed anymore. So.
Well, that's true. Well, I don't know if they were admitting to liking it, but at least that was like their first concert experience.
I like Creed. I'll admit it right here. So.
I don't mind them.
But like, they did make like an impact doing that.
Right. And so, and if you think about our popular music today, I know it's harder to narrow that down because it's so wide, but can we think of anybody like that? All these bands we've said were 20 years ago. Yeah. And so maybe there's no place for it, or maybe we've just lost it. Maybe we've lost that space and it needs to be invaded again, to use your phrase. I'm not sure. But I can't think of anybody. I mean, you have country music, which kind of has Christian.
Well, there's two types of country music.
Sure, there is. But I mean, like somebody in the I can't even name somebody famous, but that's how middle-aged I am at this point. But like somebody in the Katy Perry kind of level or Taylor Swift that's like a mega star that seems to be promoting foundational Christian ideas in their music. I don't know that I can name one.
I feel like there's got to be, but
I feel like they're really.
Okay, but do you mean like without people knowing that they're a believer? Like, does this have to be a person that's said like never said they're a believer, and you just have to kind of guess, or what it?
Well, give me one. I don't know.
Well, like the rapper NF, he is an openly Christian guy, and he has a few songs where he lightly mentions, like, there's a song he's done songs with Toby Mac where it's clearly a Christian song, regardless of what you think of Toby Mac, but like NF, almost I'd say 95% of his music, he doesn't mention Jesus.
So there's an example who's hit the mainstream audience.
Wildly popular. Okay. I think his music is really good. And a lot of it does have, at the very least, a good message, or you can see it's the type of stuff, because he has like a whole thing called therapy session, right? And so about how his music is like the way he is growing. By making it, he's like talking through his issues and then it's changing him. But a lot of his music, you can at least see like there is a message of the necessity of growth, the necessity of change, and like leaving old ways behind, this kind of thing. And then from like every now and then there will be like a line where he mentions, "I've been praying more," like something like that. So I don't know if that counts because he does say that.
So we got a rapper, we got some country people who kind of fall. Is pop still a thing? Does that exist?
I think
who's a pop star right now?
What is pop now?
Pop.
I guess it's Billie Eilish. Well, she's not alternative; she's pop, but she's not an example of this. I'm just talking about a pop star. I don't know.
Music switched.
Yeah, pop is like whatever people are listening to, but because radio is gone now, genres are weird. I think well, not gone, but like because people.
I agree with that. Genres are
like
broken up.
Yeah, it's like just what people are listening to is pop. So even country is pop. So now it's like you have the different genres. I don't think pop is a genre. Pop is just whatever people are listening to within those genres, probably.
Yeah.
Pop was, we mentioned this earlier too, how quickly generations kind of switch now. And I guess pop music is like, probably has like a week shelf life, like whatever that means. Because when I think of like,
everything has a
like
shelf
those
life.
bands we mentioned, that was like the pop music of, some of my growing up era, right? Like
the 1930s.
The 30s, man. We had those big bands and
swing bands.
Yeah, the swing bands. So I think that I just don't know if I think that's an interesting thing. That's just interesting.
Oh, okay. So are
you getting some things?
So Matt was texting me a couple things here, but unless you didn't want me to let people know that you're helping, I know you're just here for fun.
Is he coming up with the pop music for us?
Well, he mentioned some people. I don't know if I agree with the first and the last, but Mark Wahlberg, I don't know if he's
he's Catholic. They're Catholics.
He's Catholic?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
The interesting thing about that is, man, doesn't he not have a redemption story arc then, huh? Because like early age, curb stomping that guy, that like race crime and everything, and if that's true of him now, that's really interesting to hear.
Did he make?
I know
the movie,
he's mellowed out.
Did he make the movie?
Father Stew.
Yeah. I haven't watched.
What's interesting too, though, about him is he does make a lot of movies that, I guess to use this word again, are based like they're like conservative Christian values, or they're at least like. I'm talking about like him.
Ted.
Bringing light to actual terrorism is kind of like a thing like that now. That's why movies like 13 Hours. What? Go ahead, say the word 9/11.
No, talking about Mark Wahlberg. And you bring up terrorism, my mind just goes to one quote where he lightly mentions that if he were on one of the planes,
I forgot that
it would have gone down differently.
Man.
I'm just saying, things would have been different.
If I was on that differently. He's like, I would have got to the cockpit. I would have got out.
It's just a
pretty
funny
bad.
I forgot.
Yeah,
No,
pretty bad.
I'm talking about the movie The Patriot. Is that what it's called?
Oh, that's Mel Gibson.
No, not
the
the
Patriot.
Patriots Day.
Oh, is it not The Patriot?
No,
it's
the Mel Gibson
Mel
one.
Gibson, right?
Yeah,
Mel Gibson's the next person on this list.
Yeah.
The one about the Boston bombing at the.
Oh yeah.
He made that movie.
Patriot.
It
It's
is
just called Patriot.
Patriot, not
Patriot.
the Patriot.
That movie,
I think
sorry,
that's it.
my
Yeah.
bad. That movie's great, and that one is another one that I heard the same thing about, like I did with Quiet Place. That that go see it if you're a Christian, and it's. I think people just say that about those ones because it's just like there's a clear distinction between good and evil,
Yeah.
and the idea of serving.
If there's
Like,
no sex scene,
that's true.
not a ton of swear words,
That's
then
true.
it's different, and you just right.
But
there,
also,
so.
if the point of the movie or the story of the movie like pushes the idea that there is a definitive line between good and evil, and doing the right thing matters.
yeah.
And I think that's a great. If you haven't seen that movie, it's really good because it's just also honest about that story. It doesn't try and like make them seem like they had good intentions, which happens with terrorism now.
And that's so
Yeah.
important. Like from my perspective, like preaching a sermon, right? And if you have to start with there's bad, like that's a hard thing to like get to every sermon. Like let me convince you that there are actually bad things in the world, and to have it's like if Hollywood can have my back. Just
That would be
make
incredible.
preaching easier.
If you could
right?
be like that movie that just came out,
And there's less of that. That used to be really easy to do, and there is less of that today than there used to be.
Well, I mean, I don't know who I was talking to recently, but this is not a wildly crazy conversation to have because it's so obvious. But a huge difference. Oh, it was at my old church. I was talking to some people there. Think about what America was founded on. And so when you had in like the 50s too, like the 1950s is when it first started really shifting away from it. But for so long, it was just the normal cultural idea to be good and to do like, now it doesn't mean that debauchery and evil didn't exist.
Yeah.
For sure. But I mean like even the social system vilified people for like being adulterers. But now we've just gotten so far away from what founded us also as a nation that like the question is, will we ever get back to that? Well, there's no way to know. But like it's not crazy at all to say like, well, it was easier to do these things before because culturally the society was built upon this idea that like of Christian values. And sure, did it get it right all the time? 100% no. But it just even meant that people that didn't say they were believers at least agreed on like, well, we can all say these things that the Bible says are wrong. These things are wrong. They might not say because the Bible says it's wrong. They're just like, we just believe it. Now it's just because enough time has gone by too where we just didn't stick to it or those people that were unbelievers had children who clearly also weren't raised as unbelievers and they started questioning the validity of it and then they just became depraved. But
I also think legalism can play a role in that. And, like
legalism pushes a lot of people away.
You start to throw out rules that are man-made and you end up throwing out the God-made ones too. And so, like in my grandma's generation, no dancing, no going to the bowling alley, no drinking. It just was all these things. And I wonder looking back on church history, short-term church history, like those things seem like, oh, well, at least they were on the good side, but maybe that legalism, not my grandma, I'm not blaming her, she's very common. Maybe that legalism is a part of what you're saying where it's like, well, of course we can go to a movie theater and then you keep taking those steps and you end up throwing away the rules.
So the thing became the problem rather than the intention. That
happens for sure.
What my problem is when people are applying legalistic rules to things just for the sake of doing it and they don't, and I don't mean to be like crazy on the side of like progressivism, but when you're at least not, if you're the one coming up with the rules and you're not at least asking questions of why, then it's like, it just, in most cases, you're just going to cause damage. And so I have had friends or like people that I've known growing up who I have just seen, unfortunately, completely walk away. And then I look at their parents and I go, well, they hate what their parents stand for because their parents, whether, inexplicably or never offering explanation or whatever, it was just like these hard and fast rules. And it was like, it was just evil to do these things, right? Rather than, I think, training their children to know that, well, the thing itself isn't evil, but the problem with the thing is that when you do it, you are stepping closer to the possibility of temptation. Or when you're doing this thing or you're allowing yourself to do it, if you're not at least asking yourself why or being aware of being careful while doing it or whatever it is, like going to a bowling alley or something, it's just like, well, we know it's the same thing we talked about when we talked about D&D that one time. We talked about how I know that older generations think that it is satanic. Well, why do you think it's satanic? Yeah, points at Chad. Why do you think it's satanic? Well, the interesting thing about
at me.
No, my example to the person that said that they just were like, I just always heard it satanic was like, well, then all movies are satanic, right? And like, whoa, why would you say that? It's like, well, if you believe that what D&D is a game, but it is a mode of storytelling, a medium for storytelling. If it's satanic just because some people used it for a satanic purpose, and that therefore means every example of it is satanic, the same could be said of movies, because there are movies out there that promote satanic values, human sacrifice, all these horrible things in an effort to try and get you to do them or to sympathize with them. Well, then that must then mean all of them are. And so the same thing can be applied to things like bowling alleys, right? This legalistic mentality of like, well, you go to the bowling alley, well, you know what happens at a bowling alley, so all bowling alleys are bad.
I don't understand the bowling alley one at all. Like, I don't know.
It's
what
because
happens in bowling alleys.
I think it comes
Drinking
from
and
like
drugs.
bars and things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was like, that's where you go.
Because there's a pool table there.
But I mean, like my grandparents, for example, my grandpa
Okay,
won't go
it's
to
still
a movie
really
theater, at least for the most part. I think now that he's gotten older, I think every now and then he does. But growing up, the way my mom was raised, they didn't go to movie theaters. I think the only movie, I'd have to ask her to be sure, but I'm pretty certain the only movie they ever saw in theaters was Bambi. And it was the first time my grandpa, like, put his personal conviction aside. It was just because he grew up and his dad said, you don't go to a movie theater because that's where, kids go to, sit in the back and do whatever in the dark. And it's like, well, are all movies wrong? Why do we go see Bambi? But my grandpa would never say it's wrong because I go to the movie theater all the time. Well, not all the time anymore, but I go to the movie theater and my
Grandpa wouldn't say it's wrong because we do it now. So
no, it's just I'm saying like if he did say it's wrong, I feel like he would talk to us about it.
Meth.
My grandma's the same. No.
He just doesn't do it because he doesn't need it.
She goes to movies and's never had. I don't think she ever personally had a problem with movies. She went to Snow White as a kid. She tells me that, but it was like the one movie she was allowed to go to. So I don't think she ever felt any conviction. But
okay, the list has gotten really long, and a lot of them I think are jokes. Because they really surprised me.
Are any of them music? The question was music. I knew there was like actors, but
Mel Gibson, that's a hard one to endorse.
That was a different conversation, right?
Mistake.
Yeah.
Well, it's just been a list of famous people you'd asked about. Carrie Underwood, I didn't know she was a Christian.
I've heard that.
Okay. I guess Jesus
But
takes the
so
wheel.
is her music? I guess Jesus take the wheel.
That's the
There's
only one, though.
an
That doesn't-
example.
It's probably not the only one. I just don't know.
Okay.
She sang she sang at the thing. She sang the hymn.
Amazing.
No, not Amazing Grace. She sang "Oh Lord, my God, when I an awesome wonder." What's that song? I could quote the whole thing. I'm not even gonna get to the title.
Then sings my soul.
Then Sings My Soul. Yeah. Is that what it's called?
My God.
My Savior, God to me.
Yeah.
How great thou art. How great I had to do the whole song. Wow.
I was like singing in my head until I got to that line. You got there first.
But frankly, she sang it so well that I think it became that moment where it's like sewing because everybody was just caught up in the beauty of it more than anything else. And anyway, yeah.
Another one listed is Tom Hanks. I knew he was Catholic, but I didn't know how. Huh? Greek Orthodox.
I did not know he was a Christian at all.
Interesting.
Here's one that I think is great because he talks about it a lot. Is Denzel Washington?
I've heard
somehow. Well, he talks about it when asked, and then he will not only talk about it when asked, being like, "Yeah, it's Jesus," and then move on. He'll be like, "Here's how that applies politically. Here's how that applies to my life." Like really actionable ways, and then he'll talk about why, especially. I mean, because he's a Black American, he'll talk about like how that affects Black Americans specifically and in the family unit. And I think that is grossly overlooked today.
Huh? I think he talks about Satan.
Oh, he talks about Satan. I've heard him say the
I
enemy.
actually heard that he will not do a movie where a character does something evil or sinful if it doesn't show the consequences. So there's a really good example of what we were talking, right? Like
that's something that we've talked a lot about in playing D&D that we want, where we're trying to make a special effort to do now, especially since we're sharing the story on a podcast form, is if there's ever a point in which, well, we're trying to be careful in the sense that the characters we play, like you guys as players, you aren't consciously playing characters that make conscious evil decisions. That isn't something that happens.
A character makes subconscious evils.
Well, no. But then it's an effort on my part as the storyteller who has to play like all the prompts of storytelling for you guys, that if I do have to play a character that does something evil, I want through the storytelling to show the consequence of that evil. And so like you guys have played against villains already, and I'm trying to be very intentional if there's a sympathize with the villain thing, it's not with the actions of the villain. It is sympathize in the sense that like you can sympathize with maybe what made them evil, and it's sad.
Yeah, well, that's not an unchristian idea, right?
No.
Like that's
But
for
then
all
if they're
his
doing,
city.
yes, but if they're doing something evil, to show the consequence of it, because it's really important to us. And we talked about this before making the show. Is like we want to be very intentional in showing the consequences of evil, because evil's going to come up because it's a good versus evil kind of story. Yeah. But no, here's more. Denzel Washington, I think, is my favorite of all of these so far. I did not know Dennis Quaid was a Christian. No, I had heard that because he made that baseball movie. And I remember growing up.
I love that movie. The Rookie.
Oh, he was in
Amazing
I
Grace
Can Only
movie.
Imagine.
I Can Only Imagine. That's
He was
right.
in I Can Only Imagine.
Oh yeah.
Alcoholic Dad.
He was the alcoholic.
He was good in that.
Good at that.
He
Yeah.
was really good.
Method, I bet.
Fishing, I don't know.
The Rookie was a great
The
movie.
Rookie's the baseball one.
I don't remember any. I mean, it's just a
When
good
I was
movie.
growing up,
It's a
my
good, wholesome
mom,
movie.
I remember my mom telling me that the guy that made this movie is a Christian. And it's
Okay.
like a Christian movie.
Okay.
But I don't think in the movie he's portrayed as a Christian. But that was my favorite movie growing up.
I love
So
that
was like,
movie.
yeah.
The Garth
I didn't
Brooks
rewatch
song
that.
at the end. That's what put me over the line. So
Blue Miracle.
I've never heard of that. Faith Hill and Tim McGraw, that one's a hard one for me. I know that they claim to be Christians, but okay. It's just they fall under the line of being like, I believe if they say that they have faith in Jesus Christ that they are saved, but
I don't know anything about them.
well, Tim McGraw just he's
I
like
know
said
that
some things kind of similar to the Chris Pratt thing, but it's almost makes me a little more uncomfortable because sometimes it's like he's saying it with more conviction, whereas Chris Pratt to me seems like maybe he's just unaware. Whereas sometimes Tim McGraw is like, I believe this thing, and you're like, oh. How can you believe that? Yeah, but that's just me. Tim Tebow's a good one.
The Tebow,
The Tebow pose.
the prayer.
Is Chance the Rapper a Christian?
Proclaimed.
Did not know that.
I did not
Interesting.
know that either.
So there's a music one.
We still don't have anybody in the pop world. I mean, like
Jennifer Garner.
hitting the number, like
the very next one,
Okay.
Justin Bieber.
Yeah.
But
So
he's
Bieber,
had a rough.
yeah. So Bieber, I think I think his real conversion story takes place after he like was at the top chart.
Oh, yeah,
so
was
that's
peeing into rose bushes. and
Yeah,
public
yeah.
and-
That's a sad part. I was thinking about those bands we were talking about, and they get famous with that style, but fame then ruins them. When you're not in the Christian world, and so there's kind of a catch-22,
especially those
there.
who are very young. When they get into it.
It's really difficult because like getting to that stage, you have like realistically unlimited wealth. Like you can do whatever you're wanting to do.
Well, if you're 21, it feels
And
silly.
yes,
for sure,
but like when you're in that age, there's nothing holding you back from
anything.
That's
the problem.
And when humans, I mean, we're kind of messed up. We're not perfect.
Yeah. We're kind of messed
And
up.
it's really like we can't hold everybody to being like the 10 out of we can't say that everyone like you have to be exactly like Jesus. Like we can't
But we
ask
can't
for
expect
perfection.
it, you mean?
We we can hope that they can like try.
I think it plays into like, if they're claiming to be, then we can call them out for it.
Yes,
Right?
we can call them out for
It
it.
doesn't mean we should be surprised if they're failing. Is that what you mean?
Like
Because you can see all the factors that are going into it because they're clearly
it's
set up
what
for failure.
what I'm trying to say is it's disappointing in certain ways because we can never have like, oh, this guy is a great example reaching all these people and he has literally no skeletons in his closet. But like everybody's gonna have things that they struggle with.
Yeah.
And
so maybe I shouldn't be
getting-
putting disclaimers on them like when I'm reading it. Like
No.
this
That's
guy's
not what
not
I'm
a-
saying.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that once it's really difficult to have someone that we're wanting to have stay that way. being at the top, having access to it all.
And the sad reality is one of our societal quirks is that we're much quicker to point out the faults of somebody that's famous than to look at our own hearts and lives and try to live better. And even we're more willing to call people out, like Justin Bieber, than we are to call out our best friend and say like, hey, this isn't how it should be, like you could do better, man. So that is some important truth there.
Then the last few here, Kanye West. Well,
also kind of a different conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's a mental health bipolar kind of conversation.
Yeah.
But didn't know Chuck Norris from Mr. T were
Just makes sense.
Chuck Norris makes sense.
Chuck Norris seems like an actual one on here that is a sleeper agent one. I've never heard of him ever like bringing it up. But that's cool. Bob Ross, was he a Christian?
I plan on painting Bob Ross in heaven. Yeah, I think he was a Christian.
I thought that he was.
I think I've heard that. Yeah, Mrs. Whitaker used to say, our old art teacher.
She was great.
Jennifer Garner, did not know that.
She just did a Christian movie.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Jennifer.
Other one.
Yeah.
No. Married to
Ben
Backstreet
Affleck.
Boys.
No.
That's
was
the other
Jennifer
one.
Garner.
The other one. The other Jennifer, right? I'm bad with pop culture.
Jennifer Garner.
Justin Timberlake.
Jennifer Garner's the one that did the movie, the Wonder movie, right?
Who's Justin Timberlake married to?
I know who you're talking about, but it's not a is it Jennifer?
I thought it was, but maybe I'm
No,
wrong.
she's an actress
Yeah, I know.
from the show.
Doesn't matter. MC Hammer, did not know that.
What's her name?
Okay, man.
MC Hammer.
Okay, this
The
one's
last one.
This one's going to require.
This
some
is going to require discussion
preface.
because it is a alleged thing that at the very end of his life. Do we have any proof that this interaction
Sure,
happened?
it wasn't
Really?
like it happened and then the next day. No, it was out and about, and then
Jeffrey
he was
Dahmer.
killed. Yeah,
Was that at the end of his life, he allegedly
Became
accepted
Christian.
Christ. And this show probably did not talk about that at all. Right? I didn't watch it.
I didn't
for
finish it.
obvious reasons. I think there's no reason to watch it, but
dude, that's a wild, different discussion. Just like
That's
the state of
that's crazy.
media.
yeah. But I had heard that well before that show came out about this serial killer. But then that show came out, and if you want to talk about sympathizing with a villain and the acts of a villain, woof, isn't that what the whole show is about? Like everything I've seen, at least the reaction to it, you have all these people who are obsessed with him and glorifying him because of the show just being cool. But like, man, that's rough.
It's not sympathy.
I don't think
No, 'cause he's evil, but
there's like some weird attraction to
Evil.
serial killers and like
it's
Yeah, I can't think of another word other than like it's not sympathy, but it's like a sexualization.
it's
of
like
an
a
act. It's a fetishization
like
of something.
of
Weird.
the serial killers because like if they look like just good enough, then it's just like it's like they can see themselves as.
Well, you think all those
You
criminals
watch
and
the
stuff-
show and you don't go. The show isn't telling me this is right. The show is telling me it's wrong. I know it's wrong.
Yeah.
But the show's making it look so good.
Well, because it's making it look cool, like it's glorifying.
Yeah,
it, for sure.
but it's not like I don't want to say romanticized because that's when you don't show like the negative impacts of
Yeah.
something. You're like, this shows you that it's bad.
It shows-
but it dresses. It just makes it look pretty.
It's
Like,
just
it
sexualized.
it.
I mean, that's,
You know what?
It sounds like
Yeah.
what you're saying. It's just sexualized.
I saw a clip actually of my computer. We're still good. I saw a clip recently of Jeffrey Dahmer talking about like the people maybe it was Ted Bundy. It was one of those two. Who he was talking about it definitely wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer. Never mind. Well, it doesn't matter. This guy was just talking about the effects of like pornography on people in prison. And it was just like this really interesting thing because it was this guy that was talking about like his mission online is like trying to help young men get out of the grasp of that. And he's like, look at this serial killer who's talking about how much it's affected people in prison and how like a majority of these men, these murderers in prison all point to that as being the gateway to evil in their life. And it was just this interesting video. I have no idea if there's any basis to this person, whether he's a Christian or not. But you bringing up Jeffrey Dahmer made me think of that. But I actually don't think it was Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's been a good movement recently
Yeah.
in certain parts of popular culture.
Even-
They're recognizing the ills of pornography.
even in like secular culture.
Yeah, it's just data. You know,
Just
I mean, just
literally,
simple data that's like, this is bad. Like, morals aside, it's not good for people. So that's been good.
That has been. Yeah, no, there's people like, he's I mean, he is Catholic too, so it makes sense why he would say this, of course, because it is a moral thing for him. But like Matt Walsh is trying to spearhead this idea to not only to like make it illegal, because as far as he's considered, it's just digital prostitution. But he's trying to he's spearheading this idea. Well, I shouldn't say he's spearheading the idea. He is trying to push this movement forward, like he's doing with anti-abortion movements.
Well, so there, we talked about actors. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Finish that thought.
Well, what he's doing is he's just being very clear that he believes legal action has to be taken. And you are seeing politicians right now, some conservative politicians saying, we have to do something about this. And they're not, it's the one, I can't remember his name, but the one that I'm thinking of, I have no idea if he's outspoken Christian. I just know that he's conservative. So maybe that's just it's just accepted that he is, which that's a whole other discussion. But, he's talking about like not getting rid of it, which I think, of course, it should be made illegal. But he's just talking about like, if you have to present an ID for alcohol, why in the world is something like this not required? Because it's like readily available, and which is the saddest part of it. Because the data that's coming out is that like the majority of people that struggle with that were subjected to it at like 8 years old. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they struggle with an addiction of it since they were 10.
Right.
Like, what is that? Well, if that's the data, what does that point to? Well, there's nothing stopping them. But yeah, that's
so that goes when our, to put it in our whole conversation. We need people, in like they're studying data like that are Christians, right?
Christians,
I mean, we need people like
the people that overlook
they can present those stats to us, and they don't have to say like God doesn't want you to do this.
Yeah,
they just be like, hey,
because
look
your
at
brain
this.
is
It's
not
bad
working,
for you.
right.
Yeah,
if they're going to be living a life of godliness and they're seeking to, right, they're a practicing Christian, then it is going to be important to them to be honest.
Right.
When you have these people that are observing the data who have no moral compulsion to be honest.
And it's hard to be honest when you
hard to
look at any
honest.
data. Yeah. Like, I mean, just as humans.
But when you have people that have no moral obligation to it, that if they just say, they're like, well, it's right to be honest, but then they see this data, but then they see the monetary gain of it or just the evil influence of it. And so then they're swayed by that. Why in the world would they even bring it up?
Right.
And so the Christian sleeper agents we're talking about earlier, like you're saying, more of them in as politicians too would be great.
Yep.
Probably better.
Politicians, science. I mean, we just need people actually living for Jesus everywhere, right? And that's important for culture. But when we have such a weak, when churches don't call wrong, then the people are not going to make a difference.
That is true. And that's something we have talked about too, but like churches are just not calling wrong. And you said that earlier. You were talking about how sometimes you have to how hard it is to start a sermon by being like, bad things are out there and they're bad, or what did you say earlier? I think. I mean, that bad is real. Bad is bad.
Yeah.
But it's kind of sad and crazy to think that needs to be said at all, but it does, because too many people are like, they put a disclaimer on evil, like, evil is out there. But blah, 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 blah. It's just like, well, wait, what? Why are we blah, 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 blahing after evil is evil? Why are we putting exceptions on it? Yeah. It's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to wrap this up here?
That was a good conversation.
It was a good conversation.
It's all about influence, too. It's the right show for a conversation about influence.
And we're an hour and a half in, so I do think we should wrap it up. Do we feel like we encapsulated that well at the end, or do we feel like we just kind of ended? What do you guys think?
Listener, you are an influencer.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
We've said it before, and we'll say it again. Even though right now you're listening to something in other areas of your life, you are influencing people. And
so I think to try to bow it up, right?
What's the
I think it's like all of us need to do what we do with this mind towards sowing, to steal that term from the book, which I would say read the book too. Finding Common Ground, great book, older book now, but really good. But yeah, I mean, I think that all of us need to go in. We can look at Hollywood and say, like, "Hey, you guys, you should be."
But we should be.
But yeah, how are we using social media That's a big one for me. Like, does it look exactly like everybody else? Is it just pictures of our food? Or, like Jesus comes and the Roman roads, right, like allowed for the spread of the gospel. And we live in a time where social media has allowed for a greater influence than ever before. And like, are your listeners, are we in this room actually thinking about how we use that gift in some ways that God's given us, and the way we work, and that, the way that we interact with our friends? And like, I think in all of it, we need to remember that we can either just have normal conversation, or we can actually make a positive difference. One way I've thought about it in the past is we're called to be salt and light. And like, just what would it look like for our conversations to be salty, to actually matter versus, what most of us do is we talk about latest game we're playing. We talk about, how the Blazers are doing in my case. We talk about the weather. And I actually preach a sermon on that salt and light passage. Or no, the passage that says, make sure that all of your conversations are seasoned with salt. It's that line. And I just try, I try to stop saying two things in conversations that year. Don't talk about the weather and don't talk about being busy, because they're just wasted. Like, there's nothing of value in that, right? Like, everybody says it doesn't add anything, but it's like, can I actually use my words to steer the conversation towards something that actually has an influence on a person's life? And so for me, the takeaway, it's a good reminder for me talking about is like, what can I do to actually have a positive influence in every interaction, every post, every conversation? Not necessarily saying like, come to Jesus, but like showing people that, something that leads them to Jesus ultimately. Yeah.
Being aware of those every idle words, right?
Right.
That it talks about, is it Matthew?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
That you'll give an account for every idle word. We've talked about it before, and so I think we've quoted it more accurately before. But I apologize for not doing that. And what you were just saying, there's one other side to it too, which is you're saying like, if the internet and things like that are the modern Roman road, right? Are Christians also treating the modern Roman road or the internet? Are we treating it like we've treated bowling alleys? So not only are we just using it frivolously, but are groups of us not using it at all because they're avoiding it just because there is evil that exists there. So it is a little bit...
you missed one more too. Some people are just in the back of the dark bowling alley of social media doing the wrong thing.
Well, doing the wrong thing,
Christian.
right.
So,
that's true. No, that is definitely true. But identify whether or not you are the weird guy lurking in the back of the bowling alley of the internet doing the wrong thing and be convicted and change. Or are you using it just without salt? Or are you looking at it as this, like, because there's evil there, I should avoid it entirely and not even try to use it for good? Because that is a response I have heard a little bit in what we're trying to do, which is like, there is this idea because video games is involved in Christian influence as a ministry. It's like, well, I mean, video games are stupid, or like they just offer nothing. It's like, well, I think they offer about as much as anything else that's entertaining, because anything else that's entertaining can be used to captivate people's attention and to fellowship with people and be used as a medium for conversation or a medium for relatability and things like that. And it's like, if you can identify that something like video games are taking over kids' time, and adults' time, and trying to stop it from just taking over their time is clearly not working, then you have to use it.
Yeah. Well,
just like sports have.
I think that's why our church is so happy to support this ministry, because there is not a lot of sowing going on in the world of gaming and with people that are involved in that world. So good job, guys.
Matthew 12:36. It wasn't Matthew. Thank you.
You were right.
Yeah.
I think you guys are awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Keep it going.
We think you're pretty awesome.
Keep salting it up.
Hey, keep
We've
the
used a lot of
conversation
different
salty.
metaphors
Yeah,
around this.
yeah,
so
we
it
did. That's the next
salted.
t-shirt.
Salty.
Keep
is a-
your conversations salty.
Yeah, nice. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been awesome. Thank you, Chad. Real quick, 2 things. Chad, where can people find more of you? This is where you plug your show.
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to. Yeah, I'll plug away. You can connect with me on all social media platforms. I'm Chad A. Harms. And I run a podcast called Testimony Podcast. You can find that at testimonypodcast.com. And I pastor Creekside Bible Church, creeksidebiblecchurch.org.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. And last but not least, the thing I wrote down and accidentally wrote, very end, ask Chad for Chad. I meant to write, very end, ask Chad for, what we try and do with all of our guests is put you on the spot and you need to tell us a joke.
Oh, I heard this.
Yeah.
I knew that you did this,
So
and
you
I
have
would
a
have
good
prepared. No, I don't have any good jokes.
Come on, you got to give us something.
All right, I'll tell you the one that I tell my kids all the time. It's their favorite one. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow. Moo.
Eric.
It's a terrible joke. It's good. I was trying to do a whole knock knock bird thing. I know it's so bad. I started looking up knock knock jokes, and they're all so bad. But that one's the one I liked. Knock knock. I'll give you another one.
Who's there?
Who's there?
Little old lady.
Little old lady who?
I didn't know you could yodel.
That was bad.
Oh, one more. These are the 3. Like of all the ones I looked up, they were all bad, but these are the top 3 for me. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Etch.
Who?
Bless you.
See, the thing about knock knock jokes that can be funny is it's similar to puns. It's just like you're creating 2 words, or you're creating a word out of the who at the end. Sometimes that's
It's
funny.
true. So I was actually like working. I'm not gonna do this bit, but I like was just laying in bed working on this this whole knock knock bird joke thing, and I don't remember all of it now. But it was like, you say you're a chicken, and then you just keep saying knock knock. But the next one, you're like, knock, knock, who's there? And you're like, who? And then they say, who? And it's like, no, I told you I was a chicken, not an owl. I don't know why this was coming to me. I had a whole bit for a little while.
Is it like a
This is when you have a 5 and a 7. No, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old child, and I was creating like a whole routine of like bird knock knock jokes.
That's great.
I don't remember all of them.
So for the
now,
dad out
but
there who has a son or daughter who really loves birds and needs some good dad jokes.
I gotta find
dad who has
the bit in the back of my head,
because there's a joke there.
Yeah. It just needs to be ironed
You've
out.
just gotta.
Kids love the for real, like all the dads. Kids love the interrupting cow, and you can really expand that. You can do interrupting dog. Or cat, you can do it. I mean, it's
and they'll be surprised every time.
Well, if they're 3, they will be.
Oh, it's a dog this time.
This is crazy. My kids tell the worst. This has gone too long. You can just get rid of it if you want to. But my kids learned knock knock jokes, and then it just became this effort in them saying things that didn't. It would be like knock knock. Who's there? Emoji. Emoji who? Emoji poop. As long as you just throw poop in there, it's like, what is happening? So they just had so many jokes that just were like that. We went so long. They'd be like, my turn. It's like, how many minutes of these jokes can I take? So anyway.
Well, thank you for
my
that.
joke.
That's good. That's good.
It was good. No. And thank you for being here. It was such a good conversation. And we didn't really have to go to anything I necessarily wrote down. So that will continue on.
I think it went straight from your dad plays solitaire on his phone.
Well, I love when there was a minute or a point at minute 25, which is a little earlier than it usually transitions to this. So it was good. Where you go, I guess this is a transition to a serious topic. And from that point on, we were on that topic.
Serious, yeah.
It was a good discussion. So thank you guys for listening.
Everybody.
Thank you for being here, Chad.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone listening, we love you very much.
Roll the outro.
I end the program by saying, you've made this day a special day by just your being you. There's no person in the whole world like you, and I like you just the way you are.
That's a good one.